G'day everyone, welcome back to True Eagle. Today we are going to preview the North Melbourne game. It's a little bit earlier than usual. I am going away, but you can be rest assured I will be back to review this game. So we're just going to take an early look at it. We can still talk about, opposition watch, and we can talk about the Waffle Eagles game that just happened earlier today. The Eagles got their second win in a row over the D's, which is bittersweet for me as a Perth Demons fan that wants both teams to succeed. I'm glad we had a number of individuals stand out and really push for selection, which makes selection, particularly this early in the week, difficult to discuss because for a start, I don't really know the status of a few players who may or may not come back into the side this week, so bear with me there. But we can still speculate, and there's a number of players who probably did put their hand up for selection in the Waffle that we can discuss. This North Melbourne game is interesting. I absolutely am not taking this for granted. I've got a bit of a danger game feeling about this. Not really because of the compelling form of North Melbourne or anything like that. I think I'm not going to try and sugarcoat it, nor am I going to try and kick them when they're down. But if you look at their season, there's not a lot to suggest that a win is around the corner, but we can see, across the league, the number of boilovers that are happening, particularly in the middle part of the year. This is where I think we start to see clubs manage their training loads. And, I was actually talking to somebody about this today. Certain clubs ramp up their training loads right before the bye to condition themselves for the rest of the year. I'm not saying we're doing that. It would kind of make sense. We look very fatigued, but maybe someone like a Melbourne's doing that. So you just see interesting results pop up all the time, but particularly around this middle part of the year. And by extension, I just think North Melbourne, they're going to be due for a big performance and they will see us as gettable. Absolutely. We are gettable at the moment after, it wasn't a really terrible performance against St Kilda, but we just looked levels below the side that beat Melbourne a fortnight ago. And of course, the huge loss to Adelaide in between that as well. So this is a game we will have to really switch on to win because I'm expecting a good North Melbourne performance. I think sometimes when you see teams that are struggling get a bit of an opportunity, a bit of a glimpse at a win, they really start to come to play. And I think that could be this game for North Melbourne. But anyway, we'll try and keep it, not just about gut feel. Let's talk about, some specific stuff. So first of all, highlight a few, strong Waffle performers. I think there's 4 here that could potentially put their name right back in the selection mix. So Jai Cully, I have to commend this guy's return to form. Obviously coming off the ACL, started slowly in the Waffle, probably playing more forward than anything else. But 30 possessions today against Perth, 7 marks, 7 tackles, 12 inside 50s, and 1 goal. As far as Waffle form goes, that's one of the more compelling performances we've seen in the Waffle this year. And you have to commend the guy's work ethic, which is absolutely second to none. So it'd be great to see him get an opportunity. How that actually looks, we'll get to later. Jack Hutchinson, 5 goals on debut. The first 3, I think, if I'm not mistaken. 15 touches, 4 marks, 5 tackles. Outstanding performance. He was earmarked for potentially wing and half back. That was how he's described. I think to Dwayne Massey, when we picked him up, played forward in his first game. That makes sense, given that, we probably didn't want to disrupt him too much by changing his position 2 days after arriving in Perth. Clay Hall had 30 touches, 5 tackles, 3 inside 50s. It's probably his most prolific game at Waffle level. I don't know if he's a realistic chance to come in, but either way, you've got to highlight a really strong performance there. And Tyler Brockman, by all accounts, played really well. 18 touches, 5 marks, 6 tackles, 5 inside 50s. Really solid numbers there. Very balanced game. And also, I think, he played the last quarter, I think, in the midfield, which is where he was highlighted to play a little bit for us at the start of the season and had a big impact. Now, I'm not actually sure if there's a club-imposed ban on Brockman coming into the AFL. I've heard that. Either way, it'll be tough for him to come in. But if he's playing Waffle and playing well, that's a really good start because he needs to build some confidence, no doubt. So there's 4 players there that probably put their hand up for selection this week, with Brockman being iffy. I don't really know the status of that. Before we talk about North, one other interesting thing that I've seen is that we have used the equal second most amount of players this season. Last year, I think we probably broke a record for how many players we used. Certainly would have in 2022 with all those top-ups. But Richmond is at 40, and we're equal second with 36. Now, if any of Hutchinson, Cully, or Hall play, that will become somewhere between 37 and 39. I'd imagine all 3 don't play, but one could, certainly could, and I imagine maybe Cully is the most likely. So at 37 or 38. Now, part of that is injury list. We don't have a crazy injury list, but it hasn't been great. But it also does indicate that we are cycling through our list, giving players opportunities. So that's kind of a nice little positive, I guess. I don't know if the word is positive, but it's an indicator that we are exposing the list and giving players opportunity, which is nice. So let's talk about North Melbourne. So the last time we met, we beat them. My recollection of the feeling of this game was odd. We were up by 31 at three-quarter time. It was only our second win for the season, if I'm not mistaken, a drought-breaking win. We ended up winning by 5 points. I think we conceded 4-0 in the last quarter. Curtis kicked 4 goals in a quarter. I remember he seems to play well against us. Again, so much has changed since then. So I don't know how much to read into that. But either way, we won that game narrowly and it was a little bit underwhelming. I estimate about 6 or 7 changes from that game, depending on the status of Tim Kelly and Jaden Hunt. It's also worth noting Elliot Yeo, who was not the same player he is at the moment, also got subbed out with injury from that game. So there's just a few comments about what happened last time, but I'd imagine it's probably not going to be a massive indicator around how this game goes. So again, if you look at the profile of their season so far, it's not the most... intimidating. That's probably not the word. Imposing. That doesn't mean that this game is going to play out the way we expect, but they haven't had a great season so far. Their closest loss this year was 26 points, and that was in round 2. Since then, their closest loss was 38 points. It's also worth noting they're coming off the bye. Before that was a 10-goal loss or something to Port Adelaide. Nothing really compelling in all that. However, if you discuss individuals, we do know that LDU and Sheasel tend to play well against us, at least they did last year, and they're both in pretty good form as far as I can tell. Certainly Sheasel, and I think LDU is starting to really build into this year. Nick Larkey is another player that tends to tear us up, and he's had a good record against Tom Barrass. So that will be an iffy one. I will note that he hasn't kicked multiple goals in a month, but he still loves playing us, and he's a talented player. So us finding an answer for him will be, key in how this game plays out. Paul Curtis is going to be a problem again, but Brady Hoff has now become an accomplished small defender, or a defender that can play on smalls. So I'm hoping, his evolution means that we don't see a repeat of Curtis playing well against us. Again, which is an important factor in North Melbourne potentially winning this game. Their ruck in Tristan Cherry is another player that I think is having a great season. What works for us is that while Cherry is probably better than Bailey Williams, Flynn coming in does help reinforce our ruck situation. So a 2v1 of Flynn and Williams means we could potentially nullify Cherry, but he's also pretty good, at winning clearances himself. So I just thought I'd highlight another strong performance for them. The profile of their team is interesting. They've got a short forward line and a short back line, and certainly an unheralded back line with guys like Aiden Core and Toby Pink, I think, played in their last game, and Nick Larkey, the main focal point up forward as far as height goes. So that will be interesting. And another factor here is also the weather. At the moment, it's forecasted to rain, and I think rain works against us here. So given that we are relatively tall, I think it works against us if we are unable to sort of stretch their back line and their forward line to some extent by picking tools to try and get an aerial advantage. If it's raining, that kind of equalizes that threat a little bit, and it will have an impact on selection as well. North Melbourne have a lot of dangerous small to medium forward types, so they might not kick a lot of goals because the team is struggling, but there's talent there. And it will be interesting to see what sort of backline mix we go with. But in particular, Barrass and McGovern are definitely going to play, but does Harry Edwards keep his spot? Josh Rotham returns from illness, I presume. I presume that's a 1-week illness. Is he a better fit than Edwards? I'd probably be inclined to think yes, because he gets a little bit more rebound, probably a little bit better at ground level. I don't know if we need to keep a 200 centimetre key defender in addition to Barrass and McGovern, particularly if it's going to rain in this game. So that will be a factor for us for sure. Do we even go with Rotham? Do we drop a third tall defender in general? There's a lot playing out here. And of course, some other changes, we'd expect Harley Reid will miss. So as I record this, he's been suspended for 2. I'm hoping that we try and get that down to 1. My personal opinion, without being an expert on the tribunal, is that 1 is probably about right. So I think we'd be remiss not to try and get that down to 1. But almost certainly going to miss this game, you'd think. So Harley Reid will miss. I'd probably drop Harry Edwards as well. You'd hope that Tim Kelly and Jake Waterman come back in. Again, I record this without having any confirmation of that. But, both for a chance to play. I think Waterman's waiting on scan, so that will play out. But I think we're going to need Tim Kelly and Jake Waterman in this game. And as such, I'm thinking even if Jake Waterman does not play in this game, we probably go without Jack Williams. I don't think we need that height. Certainly considering the weather, but even without the weather, I think we probably roll without Jack Williams in this game. He only had 2 possessions last week, but it's a structural thing more than form as such. Jaden Hunt, I'm not sure if he's going to come back in. Now, if I'm not mistaken, that toe injury is the one that also forced him out a couple of weeks ago. So I'm thinking, maybe do we just rest Jaden Hunt? I have no idea if he's likely to come back in, but with the bye next week, is it worth rushing him back in? So I'm hoping, Kelly and Waterman come in, and maybe Jaden Hunt earns another week off, considering Gaff played okay in that same wing role. So to summarise my changes, this is what I'd probably do. okay, without, having any information on fitness and stuff like that. And obviously the forecast can change, but Harley Reid will certainly miss, you'd think. I'd imagine Tim Kelly comes back in. Jack Williams, I'd drop for Jake Waterman. Ryan Marrick is probably a player I'd also leave out of this team, not because I don't rate him. I think by now, if you've been watching for a while, I'm a big Ryan Marrick fan, but particularly in the weather, I think Jai Culley probably has earned that spot. Jai Culley is also a midfielder who can play that aerial forward game. So Marrick, he had 7 touches, developing player. That's fine. But if Culley can come in and be a midfield rotation and be an aerial threat up forward, I think that gives Culley the edge here. So I'd probably give Marrick a week in the waffle, not through really much fault of his own, but that's probably the change I would make. And I think structurally it makes sense. I'd be reluctant to bring Culley in and leave Marrick in. So Culley in for Marrick. Again, I'd probably go Rotham in for Edwards. If we don't think that Rotham's height makes sense here, we're kind of running out of smaller defender types. So that brings in an interesting question in. But I'd probably, as a placeholder, go Rotham for Harry Edwards. So that's 4 changes I've got so far. And I'm thinking, do we leave Zane True in for another week? I don't think it's particularly fair on him to get a quarter, play okay, win a clearance, and then get dropped because he earned his way back into this team. But I kind of also feel like we need to get Jack Hutchinson into the team. I think, he's 22, he's ready to go, comes in, kicks 5 goals his first game in a new system, particularly his pace. If assuming Kelly comes in, maybe Zane True keeps his spot if Kelly doesn't get up. So I'd probably go with potentially Zane True back to the waffle and get one of Hutchinson or Jaden Hunt in. So maybe if Jaden Hunt's fit, he's going to come back in if he's fit. But if we decide to rest him, then maybe Jack Hutchinson comes in and debuts as the sub. That's what I'm kind of thinking at the moment. Jermaine Jones is another player that may keep his spots. I don't know. At the moment, I've got 5 listed changes, so I don't know if that's necessarily excessive or whatever. But if we were going to replace Jermaine Jones, which I'm not necessarily advocating, I'm just spitballing here. I'm thinking also in the wet weather, with the amount of smalls that they have, Jermaine Jones could probably add some value in this game, but maybe, Jermaine Jones for Jaden Hunt or something like that. But it's not really a like for like, and Jermaine Jones probably doesn't have the competition for that roaming halfback spot. It's probably Bergiel, and I believe it's Bergiel. I learned in the Coast to Coast podcast that is how you pronounce it, and henceforth he shall be referred to as Bergiel. Bergiel's probably the most suitable. I don't know if he's banging down the door, so probably leave it at Jermaine Jones. So Zane True out for Jack Hutchinson. Is that fair? Probably harsh on Zane True, but we're looking at a guy, in my opinion, Jack Hutchinson, who I think is ready for AFL and, kicks 5 goals in his first game. He's 190 centimetres, but also a good ground level player. So we drop a little bit of height, we're dropping Williams and Marrick out of this team. Also, Harry Edwards switches for Rotham, and we replace them with Culley and Hutchinson, who are both aerial players. They're both 190 centimetres plus, both also good at ground level. In particular, in Hutchinson's case, I think he's got the speed to compensate for that. So I think structurally that's the best possible mix. But again, so much of this is up in the air in terms of fitness. So in summary, Zane True's probably hoping that Tim Kelly doesn't get up. I'm hoping that Tim Kelly does get up because I think he will be important. North Melbourne's centre bounce combination is pretty solid. They're not a bad clearance team. I'm not sure what the numbers are off the top of my head, but I absolutely see a scenario where if we're not there, particularly with Harley Reid, if it's just Elliot Yeo and company and Dom Sheed and Jinby, guys like LDU and even George Wardlaw could absolutely get on top. Sheeds was also playing increased midfield minutes. As I look at his last game, he won 7 clearances against Port Adelaide. So adding another string to his bow. They've got weapons here. What I think was happening with North is probably just the fact that they're a little bit demoralised, low on confidence, and therefore playing to a lower standard than the sum of their parts, if that makes sense, which is very common in football. But I think if they get a sniff here, this is a danger game for us. So don't get me wrong, on the selected teams, given our experience, if we have Kelly and Waterman back in, we should be expecting to win, and we should be disappointed if we don't win. I'm just saying, I feel like this is a danger game for us if we don't come to play. Now, I actually wonder if losing to St Kilda might trigger a response from us. Had we beat St Kilda, this would probably be even more of a danger game in terms of, how mentally on are we? Are we looking forward to the bye? That's the following week. I think this game's going to be tricky for us. I'm still looking forward to it. Win, lose or draw, get some opportunity for these young guys. Hopefully Culley gets a crack and maybe we see Hutchinson for the first time. I'm not dreading this game, but I just think there might be a bit of a sniff here for North Melbourne. Funny things happen in football, and they've done it to us before. And we'll see what happens. You look at some of the results around the league, Richmond getting 5 goals up at GMHBA Stadium does not make sense. It just does not make sense. Fremantle, I did tip Fremantle to beat Melbourne, but them winning by 92 points does not make sense. So, anything can happen here, but I'm hoping we put in a good shift. I'd love to be reviewing the game, whatever happens, and say, well, we tried hard and our youngsters look good. That's kind of where we're at the moment. Sounding a little defeatist. I hope that's not the case. I'll be disappointed if we don't win. But I also don't think we are so far removed from, North Melbourne in terms of quality. It's just going to be mentality. If their mentality is on in this game, that is going to be a severe challenge for us. And, for the most part, we haven't really not shown up. Other than the Adelaide game, there's no doubt about that. But, even our losses this year, I felt like sometimes the connection was off. The skill level was certainly off at times. But, I didn't feel like it was listless. So if we can match their energy, we should have the quality and the skill and the experienced players to get us over the line. But either way, I'm expecting a good game. I really don't think we're going to win big or anything like that. I expect North Melbourne to come to play, and we've got a funny little rivalry with them. An unfortunate rivalry as a byproduct of being two bad teams for the last 2 years. So anyway, guys, let me know in the comments what you think. North fans as well, let me know what you're thinking for this game. I'm expecting a doozy for some reason. And hopefully in a good way. Hopefully we win a good game. But as always, I look forward to your thoughts, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.